they do occasionally. We have got one or two who are excellent advocates for privacy, and we are able, working with them, to put forward some sort of constraints on the misuse of personal information. So it's a slow process. It's fighting against a massive tide and momentum within government. There's a fashion in governments worldwide for collecting information about the individual because they've seen supermarket loyalty cards do it and they think they can do it too. I imagine that's the way it works. But there are individuals within all the political parties, and it's not a partisan thing, who do appreciate the value of privacy, but they need advice and support because the technical understanding is not necessarily there of the considerable problems that the technology and the cult of data sharing have produced for individuals.
And I can tell you that some of those supermarket cards and some of the information collected have been used to harm people. Not just for advertising and such, but actually used against them in legal actions and things like that. The data gathering. See, my attitude is if you should look at all these programs not for the potential benefit they might provide somebody, but for the potential for abuse. And if the potential for abuse,
right.
Yeah, and that's how they should all be gauged. Unfortunately, it seems like politicians go a different direction. Prime Minister David Cameron has promised numerous times that he would scale back the degree of surveillance to which British citizens are subjected, outside of what we've already discussed, the burning of the ID cards. What, if anything, has he done to fulfill those promises?
There have been some limited improvements beyond that. We have seen a scaling back of the National Health Information Services, although there is a problem there which is perhaps too technical to go into here, in the way that the National Health Service is being reorganized. But at one point, and you must realize that 96% of the British population use the National Health Service. They don't have private doctors. At one point, it was part of the plan of the last administration that every person's medical record will be centralized in the Department of Health and made available to health service bureaucracy for a variety of purposes. I think we counted 31 bodies that would have access to this information. So that scheme has been scaled back a little.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, was there other stuff he's done?
There's other stuff he's done too. Some very minimal stuff has been done in relation to the seeking of information on people by investigators of one sort or another. So we have legislation in this country whereby there are warrantless procedures whereby the police, the intelligence services, local authorities, and various forms of regulators and administrators can obtain information about people. They can simply walk up go up to an ISP or go up to a telephone company and say, please hand over this person's record of calls. We want to see who they've been calling and so forth, completely without a warrant. Now, that has been scaled back to some degree in legislation that's going through now, but by no means far enough.
In the United States, they call those NSLs, or National Security Letters. And it's almost, as I listen to you, it's almost as if somebody from Team US and somebody from Team UK are sitting in the same room writing out basically the same agenda, because everything, it's going on over there as well.
There are a terrific number of similarities. I think particularly on the national security agenda and intelligence agenda, there is a good deal of common working, particularly between the US and the UK governments. But governments worldwide have just picked up on this as a fashion. And the Indian government is in the middle of producing a biometric ID card for 1.3 billion people, which they say they're going to get sorted out in 3 years, which will be very impressive if they manage to do it. But all sorts of governments all over the world have discovered technology and are completely infatuated with it and want to use it to make our lives better for us, whether we want them to or not.
Well, and there, of course, lies the problem all the time. Now, you've already mentioned that ordinary Brits, are kind of looking at surveillance cameras as a good thing. But over the last several months especially, it's become pretty much globally known that England is the most, camera containing. There are more cameras in per capita in England than just about any place in the world, and those stories are out there. Has that induced any kind of a change in the overall attitude of the population towards the surveillance cameras? Is there any kind of civil unrest that's starting up around the mentality of the surveillance state?
Well, there are all sorts of different things that are going on. There are the specific campaigns against CCTV. A friend of mine called Charles Farrier runs a campaign called No CCTV. That's no-cctv.co.uk if you want, or .org.uk, I forget which, if you want to look at that. But there have been for a long while people angry motorists taking their frustrations out on speed cameras. And I think we'll see a bit more of that, as what's started to develop in this country is a broad network of what's called automatic number plate recognition cameras. And the central police authorities have started to record their ambition, they say, proudly, is to have a record of every journey in Britain. And Britain will be the first country in which every car journey is recorded.
Throughout history, heads of state have been out there making these grand announcements of something true that's supposed to sound truly noble, that maybe they believe is, but that doesn't really sound that way when it reaches the ears of ordinary people.
But people, once they realize the particular thing that irritates them, once they start to pick up on these individual surveillance schemes, and they become more knowledgeable, they become more irritated. That's what we found about the ID scheme. When we started campaigning against it, it was 80-20 in favour. By the time we finished, it was 66-33 against. And so as people learned more about the scheme, they became more and more opposed. And that's true of all these things. The most insidious surveillance, and why the database state is such an insidious thing, is when you can't see it, when people don't have a natural feel for what's going on.
And as a matter of fact, I'm going to ask you about this database state. Now, even when you eliminate some, I know that the recent elimination of those records under the national ID scheme, even when you do stuff like that, you have said it yourself, almost everybody is on NHS. Or everybody's involved in some program somewhere. And to what extent does a real database state already exist?
Well, fortunately, it doesn't exist terribly strongly because it's very difficult to tie all those records together. It's very difficult to know where they are or what they are. And this was the absolute beauty from an administrator's point of view of the National Identity Scheme, because it would provide a single number for each person, which could, by a variety of administrative means, be hooked into all the records that were about them. So you would always have this ready reference, this index to all the other records that there were. Having stopped that, it makes it much, much more difficult. But it doesn't mean to say that there aren't alternative schemes, alternative methods by which data sharing, information sharing they call it. They don't like to talk about data. Information sharing, a nice soft cuddly thing, sharing, can be enabled through one legal form or another.
Now, what about civil disobedience? All over the world, there have been some very creative acts of civil disobedience against surveillance cameras, CCTV, and the like. I think there was in Australia, somebody actually built a human-like thing, and basically this human-shaped thing surrounded the camera, so the only thing the camera could actually see was the inside of this wooden thing that looked like a human. And
there's a wonderful UK comedian called Mark Thomas who's been very active on civil liberties, and he created a scheme whereby, because you're entitled to request the footage of you, if you know somebody has taken footage of you, he created a system called the CCTV players, where people would perform little acts and skits on CCTV and then request the tapes.
Oh, that's terrific! Oh, what's been the result? Oh, that's great.
That was fabulous. That was a few years ago. More recently, he also devised the mass loan demonstration scheme. We had, for about 5 years under Tony Blair, a law that said you may not demonstrate within a 1 kilometre zone of Parliament without police approval, without filling in a form for the police, and without the police had to approve, but without police setting conditions for that demonstration. Now, Mark Thomas hit upon the brilliant idea of overloading the police system, whereby on the first Wednesday of every month, any number of volunteers could turn up, and they would each hold one demonstration each. And they would each apply solemnly at Charing Cross Police Station to fill in a form to hold their demonstration.
I love it.
And then wander around with their individual placards, "Stop Bananas," or whatever their particular scheme happened to be, around Parliament Square for the afternoon of that Wednesday.
But basically they overload the mechanism, and that's brilliant.
And there is still in Britain this sort of humorous resistance, and we had it at the last census, and I'm hoping we'll have something similar at this census, at which the 2001 census, 370,000 people.
Those were the Jedi Knights, right?
Filled in their religion as Jedi on the census form.
Yeah.
And there was absolutely nothing that the authorities could do about that.
No, that was very, very good. I definitely like it. It's our intelligence is what sets us aside from those who would subject us. And if we apply it, it's always a success on our part. My guest has been Guy Herbert of No2ID, www.no2id.net. That's No2ID.net. www.no2id.net. We'll put that link up on our website. Guy, thanks so much for filling us in a bit on what's going on across the Atlantic.